Tonight, humanitarian crisis. The president travels to Poland, where more than 2 million refugees have fled the war in Ukraine. Plus, the back and forth between the wife of a Supreme Court justice and the former president's chief of staff over the outcome of the 2020 election. And
I feel great.
A new cancer treatment uses a patient's own cells to fight back.
We use my own white cells to kill the cancer cells, but it was brand new. They'd never done it before in humans.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The Russian military targeting civilian and non-military installations as millions of refugees flee the war in Ukraine. Good evening in Washington, D.C. I'm Jenna Browder. President Biden is in Poland tonight, his visit highlighting the massive refugee crisis in Eastern Europe. The president meeting with U.S. troops today and also announcing an initiative meant to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas. CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke with tonight's top story.
Under this new gas deal, the U.S. and European Union will work with international partners with the goal of providing Europe with enough natural gas that it can begin weaning itself from Russian energy.
I know that eliminating Russian gas will have costs for Europe, but it's not only the right thing to do from a moral standpoint, it's going to put us on a much stronger strategic footing.
The U.S. also announced more than $1 billion in new funding towards humanitarian assistance and opening the door to take in 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. Still, that's not even close to the numbers displaced by the crisis.
The situation escalates, in fact, every day. People have no other choices to leave their homes to find a safer place inside or outside Ukraine.
According to the United Nations, 6.5 million people are displaced within Ukraine, and another 3.5 million have fled to other European countries. In Poland, just about an hour's drive west from the Ukrainian border, President Biden met with members of the 82nd Airborne and got a briefing on the humanitarian response to the war.
And if we want to help the Ukrainian people at a time of tremendous suffering and need, we need to muster the creativity, the will, and the resources to meet staggering needs.
Poland has seen the largest influx.
Today we have got 2.5 million people in Poland, and the number is growing all the time. This presents a huge challenge to us, but it is also a huge challenge to the whole free world.
On Saturday, the president travels to Warsaw, where he'll meet again with Poland's president, along with Ukrainian refugees. He's also expected to deliver what the White House is calling a major address before returning to Washington. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And here with us now, Edgar Sandoval, President and CEO of World Vision USA. Edgar, welcome. So you were recently on the Romanian border with Ukraine earlier this month. What kind of work is World Vision doing to help refugees fleeing the war?
Jenna, thank you for the opportunity and for the invitation. I was indeed at the border with Ukraine in Romania, and what I can tell you is that the humanitarian situation for Ukrainian people is grave and is getting worse as the conflict continues. And I want to put this crisis in perspective. This is already the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. There's the latest report that I got today is that 100,000 people are leaving Ukraine every day. And so the number of people that have left Ukraine is already at 3.7 million people. And I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the streams of people crossing the border anywhere they could, many of them on foot, some of them pushing a suitcase, some packed in buses. But Jenna, what broke my heart the most was to see the young moms carrying their babies in the bitter cold, looking for safety. But I was glad that World Vision was there.
Yeah, it's a desperate situation. If you could just talk a little bit about what World Vision is doing to help these refugees.
Yes, World Vision is there, and we have been in Eastern Europe for 30 years. And so that gives us the ability to immediately respond to a crisis, not just in Romania at the border with Ukraine, but also in another close to 100 countries around the world. In this particular crisis, the key at this moment is to provide food, shelter, a respite, hygiene kits. And so World Vision staff is on the ground mobilizing to receive the refugees. We're collaborating with local authorities. We're collaborating with the Romanian Orthodox Church. As I said, we've been there for 30 years, so we've been able to build trusting relationships, and we're providing mostly shelter and respite for the refugees. There is one community in the bordering town with Ukraine, in the town of Siret. They have mobilized. They, as an example, they turned what used to be an office building, they turned it into a shelter. The community provided the beds, the sheets, toys for the children, and then World Vision came alongside to provide heat, electricity, showers. I've seen with my own eyes the impact of the generosity of so many Americans, including many of those in your audience. So I'm so grateful. And I just want to call attention to this crisis because it continues to escalate. The needs will continue to escalate. And we need to continue to pray for peace. But also, if you can, please continue to donate. You can go to worldvision.org. I've seen with my own eyes the impact of your contributions.
Absolutely. So the U.S. is sending $1 billion in humanitarian aid to the region. How integral is that?
I think it's going to be very important. As I said, people's lives have been upended, and they probably have changed forever. Even if they were to go back, some of the cities are completely destroyed. What are they going to go back to? And so this is a life-changing event already for millions of people. It's going to take a long time to recover. And this help, I think, will be instrumental in helping all of us come alongside Ukrainian people at the time of their greatest need. And I am particularly encouraged and inspired by the church. The response of the church has been just amazing. We're seeing how literally people are coming alongside to help this and take them into their own homes. I met with Father Naklad, who leads a church in the town of Iași in Romania. He himself is mobilizing to get supplies into Ukraine hospitals. He's taking families into his own home. And we have a great collaboration with World Vision and the Romanian Church to continue to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ for Ukrainian people at the time of their greatest need.
It's wonderful to hear, and we're so grateful that you're all there and the work that you're doing. Edgar Sandoval of World Vision USA, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jenna.
Well, in addition to to his ministry, there are also efforts by Samaritan's Purse and CBN's Operation Blessing. OB is on the ground providing critical relief to refugees. For more information and to partner with Operation Blessing, text OB Crisis to 71777. Well, tonight, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is out of the hospital after a week-long stay due to flu-like symptoms. The health scare for the longest-serving justice comes amid news of a possible conflict of interest. Newly revealed text messages from Thomas's wife, Jenny Thomas, show she urged former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to go forward with the plan to try and overturn the 2020 election. The texts were provided to the January 6th House Select Committee, and 29 were obtained by the Washington Post and CBS News. Jenny Thomas and Meadows exchanged multiple texts in the days following President Biden's victory over Donald Trump. She told Meadows in one of the texts, quote, "The majority knows Biden and the left is attempting the greatest heist of our history." The texts were sent at a time when former President Trump was vowing to take false claims of election fraud to the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas was never referenced in the text. The court rejected election challenges last year. So let's bring in David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst. David, what do you make of these texts between Jenny Thomas and Mark Meadows?
Well, there's a lot of different layers here. First of all, let's start with Jenny Thomas as a private citizen. Let's also understand exactly how these emails were sent. Were they sent from her personal email? Were they sent from some sort of, in some sort of capacity that she was in? So there's a lot of I's that still need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed on this. But look, I think ultimately it's going to raise a conflict of interest issue as it relates to Clarence Thomas and what he'll do on January 6th in terms of any legality or moves moving forward. Having said that, this is exactly what Democrats wanted. They wanted more information, not just to get to the bottom of it, as they call it, but this was exactly the kind of the nightmare scenario for Republicans because you're going to get a treasure trove of documents. If you're going to get a treasure trove of documents, it's going to lead you down in certain areas. And once again, is there anything illegal that she did? Doesn't seem like there's anything necessarily illegal, but the conflict of interest comes up, and so now all of a sudden the Democrats have another talking point, and so it becomes politically a problem for, obviously Trump to a degree, but definitely Republicans overall.
Yeah, to your point, Senator Ron Wyden is calling on Justice Thomas to recuse himself from any cases involving January 6th, though we'll see if the court does take up any of those cases. David, I want to talk to you about the Supreme Court and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and her nomination. Those hearings wrapped up this week. Today, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia said he would vote to confirm her, really making this all but a done deal.
It's a done deal. I mean, let's just, can we get this over with? Is Easter here yet? I mean, I think they were going to decide before Easter, and it looks like it's on a glide path to do exactly that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Amy Coney Barrett has the least amount of days before confirmation. I think it's somewhere, it's around 60 or so. I'd have to check that. But the bottom line is Ketanji Brown Jackson may rival that. I mean, she's going to get confirmed quickly. So look, if Manchin is on board, it's a fait accompli, but we kind of knew it was anyhow. It's interesting because Ketanji Brown Jackson had some serious stumbles this week, but you know what? This just in. So what? Democrats want her on the bench badly, and she'll get there.
We saw a lot of political theater this week, as we do with a lot of these hearings, during the confirmation hearings. But will Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court, David, be really a moot point by the time the midterms roll around in November?
I think so. I mean, both Republicans and Democrats will try to make some hay on it to a degree. Definitely Republicans for sure. But I think ultimately this is all about Biden. And we talk about his approval numbers. But, ultimately, how do I say this? And, I've said this before, Jenna, so here we go. But it all comes back to cream cheese. And you know what I mean by that, right? I mean, I still can't find great cream cheese in the grocery store. It's getting better, I will admit. But the point is that it's all about the supply chain. It's all about inflation. It's all about prices. It's all about gas. It's about everything. It's about everyday Americans. That's why I keep bringing up cream cheese. It's about everyday Americans just wanting to have a regular life. And every time they don't find cream cheese, if you will, or they don't find, they have a high gas price and they see that their tank now costs $85 to fill up instead of $55. It's a bad day for Biden.
David, do you think Biden could get a bump from, this trip to Ukraine, his handling of the war over there, or, the Jackson nomination? Any bump do you foresee?
Slightly, Jenna. I don't see it being a big bump for sure. And if there's any bump, it's just going to be slight. It'll be at the margins. I think people vote with their pocketbook, and I think their pocketbooks are really being affected right about now.
Yeah, it's all about that cream cheese. All right, David, Brody, thank you so much. Good to see you this Friday.
Thanks.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
And coming up, a spiritual crisis for America's children and a parent's role in fostering biblical worldviews. Tonight, a spiritual disadvantage for America's children. New research revealing American parents today lack a biblical worldview and a robust faith to share with their kids. According to the 2022 American Worldview Inventory, a majority of today's parents are millennials, a group least likely to possess a biblical worldview. And 94% of parents of preteens possess a blending of worldviews. That is both diverse and at times self-contradictory. All right, here with us now for more, George Barna, founder of the Barna Group and director of research at the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, which helped lead this study. George, great to have you with us this evening. So help us break this down. Describe what you mean by biblical worldview and what is a parent's role in shaping that?
Well, when we talk about a biblical worldview, that's the filter that everybody has that helps them to make the decisions they make. And so for a biblical worldview, that filter puts everything, looks at everything, and responds to everything through the lens of Scripture, taking biblical principles and trying to figure out how do you apply those in life. And so what we know is that with most parents in America of pre-teenage children, kids under the age of 13, only 2% of those parents have a biblical worldview. So that means that 98% of them are actually making every decision they make throughout every day based on principles that are not biblical in nature. And of course, the problem with that is that the greatest role that a parent has is to raise their children to be essentially a spiritual champion, to be someone who knows and loves and connects with and serves God. But when you only have 2% of preteen parents who themselves have that filter that enables them to make their daily choices based on biblical principles, there aren't very many parents who are going to be able to instruct their children as to how to do that. You can only give what you have. Most parents don't have that kind of a worldview.
Right. What do you think behind this new trend?
Well, it's a trend that's actually been in place for at least 25 years when I started measuring worldview. And one of the things that we find is that year after year, the proportion of adults, whether they have children or not in America, who have a biblical worldview is on the decline. Now, why is that? It's because the greatest influences in our culture on the development of people's worldview are things like the arts and entertainment media, the news and information media, government policies, education, primarily through public schools in this country. So you look at the philosophies of life that those entities are putting out in the marketplace, and it's pretty consistently unbiblical, and it overwhelms the voice of the local church in the marketplace.
Why is a blending of worldviews sometimes contradictory, as the study points out?
Well, what we find is that most Americans, about 9 out of 10 Americans, have a worldview that we call syncretism. And basically that means that you haven't really thought through what you believe and how you're going to implement it in your life. You almost develop your worldview by default. And so you embrace parts of Marxism, you embrace aspects of secular humanism, you may have some biblical concepts that you buy into. Eastern mysticism gets wound into that. Before you know it, you've got this bizarre mixture that feels comfortable to you, that makes sense to you. But when you look at it, there are some things, for instance, that Marxism professes that are at odds with what Eastern mysticism professes. And all those other philosophies, postmodernism and the rest of them, are largely at odds with biblical theism or a biblical worldview. So what you've got is people walking around as human contradictions, believing things that don't make sense, believing things that put them in conflict with their own thoughts. And consequently, what you have is children growing up with that same mixture of ideas from many different worldviews, but the biblical worldview really not getting a fair share.
All right, George Barna, we are out of time, but it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much. George Barna with the Barna Group.
Thank you, Jen.
And when we come back, how an experimental treatment could save the lives of thousands of patients living with cancer. Doctors and patients alike are singing the praises of a cancer treatment that uses the patient's own immune cells to fight the disease. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson introduces us to a man who has experience.
75-year-old Doug Olson has good reason to smile.
I feel great.
11 years ago, doctors told him the treatments they'd been trying for his potentially deadly blood cancer, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, failed.
Terrified is probably the best word to describe it.
Feeling he had nothing to lose, Doug agreed to an experimental treatment developed at the University of Pennsylvania called CAR T therapy. It uses the patient's own immune system, specifically the T cells.
Your blood comes out of one arm, goes into a machine that takes out your white cells, and then the rest of your blood goes back in the other arm.
Scientists take the cells they removed and add receptors that allow them to bind to the invading cancer cells and kill them. These modified T cells are multiplied in the lab and then infused into the patient.
We use my own white cells to kill the cancer cells, but it was brand new. They'd never done it before in humans. I'm sort of an eternal optimist. I figured, what the heck, worked in mice, maybe it'll work in me.
Did it ever? Just 5 weeks after receiving the treatment, Doug's doctor gave him amazing news.
And he said, Doug, we can't find a single cancer cell in your body.
Doug's success paved the way for thousands to be treated with CAR T therapy. Now, more than a decade later, he's still cancer-free, showing drug companies and other scientists that continued research could pay dividends.
we feel pretty good about using the word cure now.
Basically, that's a game changer.
So far, the FDA has only approved these therapies to treat blood cancers like lymphomas and leukemias, as well as multiple myeloma. It's usually done at academic medical centers like Duke after other treatments failed.
Their outcome is about 45% for 5 years now. These are the latest studies that showing that the duration of response is extending and actually is not coming down. So I think eventually this will be a cure.
While CAR T therapy has proven successful for certain types of blood cancers, it has not shown to be effective against other more common cancers, but that could change.
Cancer researchers are currently conducting trials to treat some of the deadliest forms of the disease, including pancreatic and lung cancers, as well as brain tumors.
This is only the start. CAR T will expand more and more to different indications, including more leukemias, including actually other types of cancer in the solid tumor.
So while cancer is America's second leading cause of death behind heart disease, cancer deaths have actually fallen by more than 30% since 1991. Experts say the decreased death rate is due to prevention, such as not smoking, screenings like mammograms, and treatments such as CAR T therapy. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. And still ahead, helping displaced Ukrainians with the sound of her voice. And finally tonight, a voice of gold. We recently brought you the story of a Ukrainian girl singing Let It Go from a bomb shelter. Now Amelia Onasovich is singing to the masses, performing the Ukrainian national anthem in front of thousands at a charity concert in Poland. And this was a benefit concert called Together for Ukraine. It raised over $1 million. And Amelia, we should say that she says this was, she practiced singing morning, noon, and night, and it pays off. That's a lot of courage to sing in front of all those people. Well, we will leave it on that note tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.